Happy New Year! Hello there. It's the start of a new year, and at this time I usually do a top 10 films of the previous year video. However, 2020 being what it was, that's clearly not going to happen this time, so I thought I'd come up with something a little bit different. Basically, an overview of the whole of 2020 from my perspective, in terms of the new movies that I saw, the television that I watched, and the DVDs and Blu-rays that I purchased, or at least the significant ones. Now, there's going to be a lot of different things in this, so we better just get started. And I'm going to go from the beginning of the year, in chronological order. So I guess the first thing to talk about would be the one and only film that I actually saw at the cinema in 2020, in late January, which was Jumanji: The Next Level. Now, I've mentioned this before, but I haven't actually reviewed it or said what I thought about it. So, what did I think of it? Basically, I liked it. I mean, why wouldn't I? It's pretty much the same movie as Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, which I also liked. It's the same cast, it's the same basic premise, it's just as amusing. And we have a bit of old school class added this time with Danny DeVito and Danny Glover. Both of whom it's actually really, really nice to see again, particularly Danny DeVito, who I have not seen in donkey's years. I can't remember the last time I saw Danny DeVito in anything. I think it was that Friends episode where he's the male stripper. Good God, how long ago is that? Anyway, it's a fun movie. You've got Karen Gillan there being all nice again. If you like Welcome to the Jungle, you'll probably like this. And I did. I give Jumanji a unremarkable but perfectly pleasant B. Now, I guess that the next thing would be the Hammer Movie Fest that I had this year. Now, I've done videos on this before, so I'm not going to go over the same ground too much. Basically, I had a bunch of Hammer movies that I got on Blu-ray this year, and I watched them, and I thoroughly enjoyed them. It started with Satanic Rites of Dracula in this late 2019, but the ones that I really, really liked this year basically were Taste the Blood of Dracula, Scars of Dracula, Dracula AD 1972, and The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. Basically all the ones that your traditional Hammer fan hates. Me being my usual contrary bastard, I thoroughly enjoyed all of those. I guess the only non-Dracula one that I really, really liked was The Vampire Lovers, which I've also done a proper review of on here, so again, just a brief touch on for that. That seems an awful long time ago, it shows you what a long, long year this has been. Now, I guess the next thing of any note happened in late March and is TV related. Now, I'm guessing that anybody who's following this channel particularly closely will probably be able to guess what I'm going to talk about here. And yes, I'm going to talk about the Skye and Lana return on Neighbours, which was very much a surprise and led to probably one of my favourite things of the year. For those of you unfamiliar, Neighbours is an Australian soap opera that I watched in the 80s and the early 90s. I gave up on it in disgust about 1993. I started watching it again in 2004, early in 2004. Mainly because I just even though it was completely different by that point, I liked the characters and I was enjoying them. And later in the year, they did the character of Lana Crawford, played by the lovely Bridget Neval, and the whole kind of pseudo-lesbian storyline between her and Skye, which I was a huge fan of at the time as well. I really rooted for those two. I absolutely loved that story. I was stunningly disappointed by the way they copped out on it, and then they just threw Lana out the door. But I was enough of a fan of Bridget by that point that I followed her over to another show called Wicked Science, which I've also done reviews on this channel. So their kind of return to Neighbours and as an actual couple, even though it was only for 3 episodes, it was one of the most astonishing things of the year. I mean, I did not expect to ever see those two actresses on screen together as those characters ever again, let alone in that context. So that was pretty astonishing. I mean, I can quibble with some of the details. I can quibble with the fact that it was only 3 episodes. I can quibble with the fact that we should have done this 15 sodding years ago. You know, and it would have been nice to have actually seen more of them and see them reunite and see them get together instead of coming in at the tail end. But I get it, it's TV, you know. One of the actresses lives in LA now. Bridget doesn't even act anymore. I mean, fair enough. I never expected to get anything. So what we did get was pretty fucking amazing. But the other thing it did, of course, was remind me just how much of a fan I was of Bridget Neval back in the day. Like I said, I absolutely loved her in Neighbours, and I followed her over to Wicked Science, which I watched both seasons of. And I was a big fan. Now you might wonder, well, why hasn't she been much on your channel then, if you're such a huge fan? Well, you see, the problem was, the end of 2005, when Wicked Science Season 2 finished, that was basically it. There wasn't a third season. They didn't, despite promising, lying bastards, bring her back to Neighbours. And Bridget pretty much disappeared after that. And like I said, she's long since actually retired as an actress now. And unfortunately, I didn't have the foresight to tape any of it. I mean, to be fair to myself, I could hardly have known that I was going to become that much of a fan. So, you know, I can't really blame myself for not taping the Neighbours stuff. I mean, I don't predict these things. It just sort of happens. With Wicked Science, I don't know. I mean, I guess I just kind of assumed that it would get proper DVD releases. You know, like Season 1 and Season 2 on DVD. I mean, it was the mid-2000s. Everything was getting season box sets on DVD. And it wasn't like it was an old show, it was a new show. So I assumed that that would as well. And unfortunately, it didn't. So basically, after 2005, that fandom was pretty much fucked. You know, I had nothing of it. There was nothing new. Literally, all I had, I think, were a couple of clips that somebody else had uploaded from Neighbours. There was nothing of Wicked Science at the time, onto YouTube. And I mean, you know what the picture quality of mid-2000s YouTube videos was like. Pretty bloody lousy. Now, you can actually see a couple of those clips in a couple of my multi-fandom vids from my first year on YouTube in 2008. So she was still around even then. But I mean, what can you do? There's not much you can do with a fandom that you have no access to any of the materials. It's perfectly possible to remain a fan of an actor or actress who's retired, just like it is to remain a fan of a TV show that's finished. But it's really, really hard to do when you haven't got any access to it. So, yeah. But what those 3 episodes did was remind me, wow, I used to really like her. In fact, I still really like her. Is there any way we can get hold of that older stuff? So what I did was I jumped on eBay. I mean, I've looked several times over the years. I can't remember the last time was. It's probably a few years ago. And lo and behold, Wicked Science is actually on DVD in proper season box sets, albeit released in Spain. Now, I still think it's fairly bizarre that an Australian TV show has only got a proper DVD release in Spain. Apparently it was big in Spain and Italy. Apparently Bridget's still got lots of fans in Spain and Italy. Okay. So I ordered them. It cost a fair bit, especially with the postage from Spain. But you see, the thing about me is, I can be notoriously tight-fisted when it comes to most things, but when it's something I actually care about, suddenly all that goes out the window. You know, suddenly I'm like, it's only money, who cares? So I ordered those straight up. Now, the other thing, of course, that she did was Neighbours, and that's not commercially available, apart from some of the early ones. And I was like, is there any way to get hold of the original stuff that she was in? So I kind of was a bit cheeky, and I asked around a few internet contacts who I knew were fans, not necessarily of Bridget, but of Neighbours, just to see if anybody had or knew how to get hold of that stuff. And I was lucky enough to get hold of not just basically the entire Sky and Lana story, I was lucky enough to get hold of the entire 2004 season. Now, please don't ask me to upload them. Fremantle are notoriously block happy, so it would be a waste of time anyway, and I don't fancy getting copyright struck either, so I'm sorry, but I can't do that. But you had better believe that I marathoned the shit out of that stuff. I marathoned Wicked Science Season 1, probably a bit too much, really, a bit too quickly. And I marathoned the hell out of the 2004 Neighbours season. We're talking like 240 episodes, I think. And I marathoned the hell out of that over like 2 months. I was actually going to slow down a bit when it actually came to the Lana stuff. Didn't quite work out that way because it was just so freaking addictive and compelling. You see, I mean, you forget, because it's been so long. I mean, we're talking nearly 16 years at that point. You forget just how much of a rough time Lana actually has for most of her stint. Between being freaking terrified that people are going to find out that she's gay, not least because of what happened to her at her old school when they found out, and just the sheer up and down roller coaster of her friendship / relationship with, I'm straight, honest, Sky. She has a miserable time for an awful lot of her stint. And Bridget Neval is so good at being heartbreakingly fragile and vulnerable that you're just like, Jesus, can this chick catch a break? Can somebody give this girl a hug, please? So you're like, I've got to watch the next episode now to make sure she's okay, yeah. So, yeah, I ended up going through that rather quicker than I probably should have done. Now, I will say I was much better with Wicked Science Season 2. I actually, probably because I realised I was burning through this stuff so quick. I restricted myself to 1 episode a week with Season 2 of Wicked Science, and since it's 26 episodes in the season, it's taken me 6 months to go through it. In fact, I only just finished it just last week. And yes, if anyone's wondering, I will be doing a Season 2 review, probably sometime in the next few weeks. But yeah, I have to be honest, the Bridget Neval Revival Fest that took place in my house this year, I'm sorry, it was the highlight of my freaking year. I know I sound like a squeeing David Tennant fangirl. I don't care. I never expected to see any of this stuff ever again. So to get it all back in 1 year and get something new and something really lovely as a kind of delightful extra cherry on top, that was just absolutely fantastic. And of course, I've got this stuff now. I mean, I'm not going to rewatch them immediately, but it's certainly not going to be another 15 sodding years before I watch them again. And next time I'll probably go through it a bit slower as well. But yeah, it's part of my collection now. You know, it's a fandom that's actually part of my collection now, and I can make part of my regular viewing schedule. I can make reference to it here and there on my channel. So that's really nice. I really, really loved that. Okay, on to the next thing. I guess the next thing would be in May, in Australia anyway, which was the release on DVD and Blu-ray of the first of this year's Doctor Who Missing Story animations, which was, of course, The Faceless Ones. Now, I did a review of this earlier in the year, and it wasn't a very positive review, to put it mildly. I have a bit of a confession to make here. I actually rewatched The Faceless Ones in September. Well, I say rewatched, I mean I didn't even make it all the way through on my first attempt, and I tried several times, and I just couldn't make it through. I actually watched it properly in full in September, and I thought it was okay. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not declaring The Faceless Ones to be a classic. I don't think it's particularly great, but it wasn't as bad as I thought the first time. The second time I actually watched the 4.3 black and white version. Maybe that helped a little. But in all honesty, I think the problem when I watched it the first time was just the timing, because I bought it on Blu-ray and I didn't watch it straight away for a couple of weeks, in fact, and people were kind of saying on YouTube, are you going to review the faceless ones? And instead of saying, in time, I kind of thought, I'd better watch it, I'd better review it. And that was a mistake. I'm not doing that again, I'll tell you that. It was a mistake simply because of the timing, because I had literally just finished marathoning Wicked Science Season 1, and I was still in the middle of marathoning the 2004 Neighbours season. I may even have been in the middle of the Sky and Lana stuff, I can't quite remember at this point. But either way, I was really not in the right frame of mind for the faceless ones. I was really not in the right headspace to enjoy an animation of a piece of slow-paced 60s television. My brain was elsewhere, let's put it like that. So I think that was probably a large part of why I really did not enjoy the faceless ones the first time. Like I said, I still don't think it's fantastic, but it was okay. I'll give it a B or a B minus now, as opposed to the D that I gave it back then. Right, moving on again. I guess the next thing would be the 7th and final season of Elementary. Now, that was 2019 in the US, but in Australia it was 2020, both on television broadcast and on DVD release. And I actually watched season 7 on broadcast, which is the only time I've ever watched a season of Elementary week by week on broadcast. Because, I didn't start watching the show until several seasons in, so I actually binged watched seasons 1 through 4. And with season 5 and season 6, I just never caught the start of the season on Channel 10, because they always shove it, late at night at some ridiculous hour, and bury it in the schedules, and I never saw when the season had started. So by the time I realised it was on, I'd missed a load of episodes, so I was like, oh, well, I may as well wait for the DVD. This year, I actually saw the start of the new season, and at that point, they hadn't even got a release date for the DVD here. Obviously, they have now, and I've since bought it. So I thought, well, I might as well watch it this way. And I rather enjoyed watching it kind of old school, week by week. I haven't done that for a very long time for anything, apart from Wicked Science Season 2. And it was a great final season. I thought it was, even though it was a bit shorter than most of the other seasons, at 13 episodes, it was a really good final season. It had a really good story arc with a really strong villain. It was just a great end to a great show. I absolutely love that show. I think Elementary is probably the best TV show of the 2010s, in my opinion. So I absolutely loved that. I guess the next thing after that would probably be the new Red Dwarf special, which I got on DVD in September, The Promised Land. Now, again, I've done a review of that separately, so I'm not going to, say too much about it. I enjoyed it. It's fine. It's fun. None of the new Red Dwarfs quite live up to the show's golden age in the 80s and the 90s, but at the same time, unlike most modern revivals, which are bloody awful and often kind of reflect badly on the originals, the new Red Dwarfs don't, and neither did the new special. It's just fun, They don't reinvent the wheel, but they don't destroy it either. It's fun to see the guys back doing what they do, and it's always entertaining and enjoyable. Now, I guess the next thing, it relates back to something I was talking about earlier. It's more of an anecdote, but it's a fairly amusing one. It amused me. Took place in October. A fellow YouTuber called Nikamon, who is also a fan of Bridget Neval, asked me for permission to remake my Wicked Science Season 1 review. Basically, he wanted to take the audio, i.e. my actual review, and put it to live-action clips from the show, rather than just the photos that I'd used. And I said, yeah, sure, as long as I get a nice big fat credit and a link to my channel, why not? Go for it. And he did a really nice job. What I did not expect, however, was for him to have the sheer barefaced cheek to then tweet a link to this video to none other than Bridget Neval herself. That kind of took me by surprise. I mean, I know she's on Twitter, but it would never occur to me to do something like that, honestly. I mean, I just couldn't do that. I'd feel weird about doing that. You know, I would feel like I was being pushy or something like that. I don't know, maybe I'm too reserved or too repressed or too introverted or too British. Something like that, I don't know. And she actually responded and said that she loved it. And this is what cracked me up the most. She said she totally agreed with my assessment that the character of Dinah was actually a really awful person. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go and watch my season 1 review. Because I really eviscerate that character. I get quite het up under the collar about that. But yeah, that just cracked me up. So I woke up to this one morning, you know, and I'm sitting there vaguely amused, vaguely bemused at the idea that, you know, the actress who played Lana in Neighbours and Elizabeth in Wicked Science has heard one of my videos, heard one of my reviews, and with my actual voice as well, not one of the computer ones, and agrees with it. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Surreal, but very flattering and very gratifying. And then I suddenly think, wait a minute, I'm sure that at least once in that video, if not twice, I kind of say that I'm kind of sweet on her. Oh my, that's kind of embarrassing. 2020 was just a really weird year all round, wasn't it, basically? That's just so strange on so many levels. On to the next thing, which is, I guess, the thing that a lot of you are waiting for, which is Fury from the Deep, which was the next Doctor Who animation of a missing story. Now, I saw this in November when it came out in Australia. It's a story that, aside from reading the novelization when I was a kid, we're talking a very long time ago, I've little familiarity with, obviously because the whole thing's missing and I can't watch telesnaps or that sort of thing. I was actually planning to watch just the first 3 episodes on one night and then watch the rest another night, or maybe even 2 episodes per time like I did with the Faceless ones, considering I struggled through that somewhat. It's probably a measure of how much more I enjoyed Fury from the Deep that I watched the whole damn 6 episodes in one night. I absolutely loved Fury from the Deep. I was really surprised by how much fun this one was. I mean, it took me a little while in the first episode to get used to the animation, but once the story got going, I was all in, and it kept me gripped throughout the whole thing. And it really went by surprisingly fast. I mean, for a 6-parter, the first episode's a little slow as it kind of sets things up, but then once it kicks off, it just kicks off. And I was just sat riveted. For a character that I'm not particularly all that fond of, I thought Victoria's departure was surprisingly emotional as well. Really well set up and played. She doesn't really want to leave the Doctor and Jamie, but she just can't hack being scared out of her wits every 5 minutes, everywhere they go. You can't really blame her. Yeah, this was great. I would go so far as to say that Fury is now one of my favourite Second Doctor stories. I give Fury from the Deep a straight A, and I'm really looking forward to whatever they've got for us next year. I guess the next thing would be the most expensive DVD/Blu-ray purchase of the year for me. Now, up to this point, I thought that the most expensive DVD/Blu-ray purchase would probably be either one of the Doctor Who Blu-ray sets earlier in the year, season 26. I'm not sure whether season 10 or season 26 came out in 2020 over here. It was one of them, I think. Or Wicked Science, because that was fairly expensive, again, especially with the postage from Spain. But no, it turned out we had something far more expensive in the pipeline. It was season 1 of a TV show, and it cost me $150 to buy it. Now, you might think that's a bit excessive for a TV show, isn't it? Especially just for one season of a TV show. Well, it doesn't seem quite so excessive when you consider that there's 26 discs and a total of 174 episodes. You're probably thinking, what the hell kind of TV show has 174 episodes in one season? And the answer is, of course, a soap opera, a nightly soap opera. Probably my favourite soap of all time. I'm talking, of course, about the cult classic 80s Aussie soap, Sons and Daughters, which I've mentioned and done a few vids on this channel over the years. I love this show. It's completely lurid and completely over the top, and gets more so as it goes on as well. I grew up with watching this show in the 80s. I saw some repeats again in the 90s, and I watched a repeat run on 7/2 in the late 2000s and early 2010s. And I just love this show. There was no way I wasn't getting it, even at that price. So yeah, that was definitely the most expensive thing that I bought this year. After that, I guess the last thing to talk about is the New Mutants, which was pretty much the only new movie that I've seen this year, bar Jumanji: The Next Level, which I saw just at the end of November. This has looked interesting to me for a while because of the premise, though reshoots and poor reviews did rather dissuade my enthusiasm. But I blind bought it anyway, and I'm actually glad I did. I thought it was a refreshing change from the usual comic book stuff, being more of a thriller/horror set in the X-Men universe, and it often feels more like a late 90s teen horror than the usual fare, though we still have to have CGI overload in the climax, of course. But overall, I found the cast, the characters, and the story engaging, and at 90 minutes, I mean the last 5 of which are just credits, it doesn't have time to hang around too long and get dull. And I rather liked the little love story between Maisie Williams and the lead girl, which was sweet but understated and just there and not made a big song and dance about. I enjoyed this way more than I expected, actually. I give the New Mutants a surprisingly strong B+. I guess that's that. Before I go, just a quick word about the channel. I actually really enjoyed my channel in 2020. Was actually my most productive year ever, which is fairly amazing to think about, considering, you know, it was my 13th year as a YouTuber, and it was my most productive ever. Previously, my most productive years were 2008 when I started, and 2016 when I started doing the reviews. But no, 2020 actually beat both of those. And in fact, even though I did nothing but music videos from 2008 to 2015, I actually did more music videos in 2020 than I have since 2009. And that's only like 50% of my output. That's not even counting the reviews. So I thought that was pretty good. I enjoyed kind of bringing back the music videos this year. I mean, I've never stopped doing them entirely, but certainly since I started doing the reviews in 2016, they've become kind of an adjunct rather than the main thing. But in 2020, it was almost like 50-50 between them. I wasn't planning that. It just sort of happened. I'm kind of glad it did. Of course, the other big thing of 2020 was this. Me getting a microphone and actually being able to talk to you instead of going through the computer voice. I mean, I think the computer voice was fine. I think it had its place. It could be amusing on its own terms. I just thought it had run its course and it was time for a change. And I think it's worked. People seem to like it, and I like it. I like the end result. And I actually like doing this. I actually, actually sitting here and doing this, whether I'm just rambling like this or I'm reading from a scripted review, it's given it a kind of an extra challenge and an extra friction to making the videos. So I've really, really enjoyed the channel in 2020. I hope I can stay similarly enthusiastic and productive in 2021. And I hope you'll all stick with me through the next year. I guess that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, maybe we can make this an annual thing as well. I suppose it depends if anybody wants to listen to me ramble on for over half an hour now. Good God. This is like the longest one I've ever done, I think. So I think I'd better call it a day. Happy New Year again. There'll probably be a music video in a couple of days, but other than that, I will talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.